Welcome to the Northernlights podcast where we talk all things MMA. I'm Dwain and I'm joined by Mark. Today we're going to talk about Arman versus Dariush and fantasy book UFC 300. But before we get into that, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe as we have brand new episodes every single week. So Mark, let's talk about Arman versus Dariush and the whole fight card. Do you think this has potential to be one of the biggest fight cards of the year?
It's definitely one of the biggest fight night cards in recent memory because you look at it and you think, oh, I might tune in for that, if I'm still up. And then you see the co-main, I think I'll probably like to watch that. This just gets better and better, and then eventually, you're sat up by yourself at 3 a.m. covered in Doritos watching the entire card.
Watching your favourite fighter get knocked out and you go to bed in tears, and your wife asks you what wrong. Nothing, love, nothing.
We know
it's so
that
depressing. It's too depressing being a European fight fan. It's literally like, oh, awful. But the quality of fights on this fight night is actually quite insane when you think about it. So we've got Sean Brady versus Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, that's an exciting fight on its own. I could see that main event in a fight night. Never mind opening one up. But with Kelvin going down nowhere and he's looking really healthy, actually, do you think he could have some success in welterweight?
I think he could if he actually gets into the cage. He seems to always have his biggest trouble seem to be before the fight or preparation for a fight, whether it's an injury, an infection, whatever the hell it seems to be, like dog died, something like that. It seems to be, I'm excited for a Kelvin fight once he's in the cage. I can't invest in it anymore. I can't spend my excitement waiting for him to get there. But I do believe that Kelvin, it could look a lot better at welterweight than what it did at middleweight. It was kind of up and down there for a little while.
And that's the thing. I think Kelvin's got a lot of potential and he's really skilled, but I just think middleweight's too big for him, because he's quite a short guy, isn't he? He's quite small. I don't think he's 5'11". Is he like 5'9", 5'10", something like that? So he's not big. So we could see him do quite well at welterweight. Don't forget he was going to fight Shavkat, which would have been a very tricky fight for him. So I think he might have dodged a bullet there, but we'll have to wait and see. But we could easily see him fight like Ian Gary or someone next year, win, move up. Because don't forget, Kelvin's a big name. There's no denying that he's a big name. He could move up, maybe fight for a title within 2-3 fights if he does well, right?
Kelvin definitely could. I mean, he's got the name value, but it's not like a household name value.
No.
It's more, like he's the guy that probably gave Adesanya his toughest fight, apart from when he's got knocked out. But,
I'm dominated by Strickland, but apart from that.
Yeah, and that's the key word, dominated, isn't it? But I think that's the thing to remember is since that fight, Kelvin's been up or down, and you think, well, look, he's knocked out Michael Bisping. That was in 2017. When someone's highlight reel gets to become like over 5 years old, you start thinking, well, are they that same fighter anymore? So, I mean, maybe this will be the fight where we find out if Kelvin Gastelum is back or not, because Sean Brady, he's no joke either.
No, the real dangerous fight, and it's going to be a really, really fun fight either way. But rather than moving down, we've got someone moving up. Figure he's moving up to fight Rob Font. Again, the exact same question. Do you think Figure could do well in this division? Because don't forget, he's a former champion as well. So, is he a 2-time champion? I don't know. I can't remember. He might be. It got swapped around like a hot potato, that belt. So I've genuinely forgot. Did Marino and him fight 500 times or 2 times? I don't know. It was a ridiculous amount. But he's a former champion. And if he can do well here, we could see him right at the top of this division really, really quick.
100%. It's one of those, this seems like when someone swaps divisions, this seems like the fairest way to do it because he hasn't just got given a title shot going off merit alone. Figure is fighting one of the top contenders in Rob Font, and if he does this, maybe there'll be talks of him getting a title shot. But hell, Figure's a hell of a fighter. I love to watch him. I love to watch him fight at flyweight. Hopefully, it's the same in this weight class as well. And I hope he kicks Rob Font's ass. And I don't know why, Dwayne. He's just one of those fighters I do not like.
Oh, no. You don't like putting lasagna face. What's he done wrong to you?
Hey, I didn't go for the bullying technique. I didn't go down that road, Dwayne.
Yeah, but I think it will be a fun fight. But Rob Font's dangerous, though. I think people forget that. You know, yeah, he loses to the top guys, but he's one of those fighters that can, you know, batter someone on one night and then get destroyed the other night. You know, kind of like Michael Johnson or whatever. He's that sort of
Yeah.
fighter, so he could do really well. But I think Figgy's going to get it done, and I'd love to see him jump up, maybe fight someone like Jan eventually, or Marab, but you know, go up. But I worry he's just too small for that division. You know, there's some really tall guys there, which is wild to talk about bantamweight, isn't it? But when you've got people like, you know, Sean O'Malley and what's his name? The other, what's his name?
Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah, Aljamain Sterling's thick, and
Corey Sandhagen.
Corey Sandhagen. I nearly called him Sean Sandhagen. I was like, what's his name? Oh yeah, Corey Sandhagen. But he's massive as well, so it's
This
tricky
is a strange thing though. When do we don't often talk about when fighters move divisions? There's like, oh, is he going to be too small? Usually it's like, you know, too big. I mean, unless you're Alex Pereira, you know, like then we're just saying, is he too big for a heavyweight? Does he have to cut weight to go into heavyweight? Because he's just a giant of a man. But yeah, Figgy, I am rooting for him because I think, you know, if he gets through Rob Font, that opens up the bantamweight division to so many more exciting fights as well, rather than just potential rematches and rematches. We've seen this many times before, and I think bantamweight could be a really exciting division if we don't go down that route. I don't want to see rematches again and again and again, and it's already starting to get there. So come on, Figgy, let's revive this division. Throw yourself in there. Do a Sean Strickland and throw a spanner in the works and beat Rob Font and go for a title shot.
I'd love that. And for me, bantamweight has potential to be one of the best divisions. It's got real killers in there, some proper legends. You know, you've got Dominic Cruz knocking about, and it upsets me that we never got Cruz versus Aldo. I don't know how they didn't do that. You've got two legends in the division at the same time. I thought, what, you're not going to put them together? But it is what it is. I've missed out on that fight, and it's never going to happen. But then we have Jalin Turner has stepped up to fight Bobby Green. Dan Hooker is out due to breaking his arm again. Are you disappointed that we don't get to see Dan Hooker on this card?
I like to watch Dan Hooker, but I'm not. I don't, you know, like all my eggs aren't in that basket. To be honest, with whenever he's on a card, because I always think there's something usually a bit more interesting going on. But Dan, I think he's a little inconsistent as well. I mean, it's easy for me to say who's never stepped into the cage once in my life, but you know, like he's either amazing. Do you remember against Dustin Poirier in 2020? That could have been fight of the year contender.
It's one of the best fights I've seen. Yeah, so good.
And there's Michael Chandler that knocked him out in the first round. Then there's Islam who beat him in 45 seconds or whatever the hell it was, something like that. So it's like kind of inconsistent. We were saying when he got his win. When was it? About a year ago. I was like, oh, that's him back in the win column now. This is him getting back to it. It's a bit inconsistent for me to get really excited for it. I know you're a big Dan Hooker fan.
Yeah.
So maybe the question's better geared towards yourself.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm gutted. I was really, really looking forward to seeing him back, but it just seems it was too early. You know, he's broke his arm in the same place at the same point. It's like, well, it's clearly too early. You shouldn't have been training back yet. Should have looked for next year. He said he's going to look at returning for UFC 300, so that could be fun, but we'll get on to that into a minute. But let's talk about the actual fight itself. We've got Jalin Turner versus Bobby Green. If Bobby Green gets a win here, this could really see him move up quite high in that sort of lightweight division, even though he's fighting a lower opponent. It's like, well, maybe he fights Gamrot next, or maybe the winner of Dariush and Arman. You know, we could see him up in sort of with these title contenders. Can you see him moving up and fighting someone bigger in that division quite soon?
Really can, to be honest. Bobby Green seems to be one of them. He's been a name that's rattled, just from a fan's perspective, he's a name that's rattles around a little bit. And when he gets a win, and it comes up, all right, I see Bobby Green one. And before you know it, he's nipping on the heels of like top contenders. Exactly. Like if he gets through Turner, then definitely, he could definitely do it. Was Jalin Turner Dan Hooker's last fight?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I do remember. Yeah, so if Bobby gets through him, hell, we could definitely see him, like you say, Gamrot, someone like that, to really step up in competition. And before you know it, we could be talking about Islam versus Bobby Green too.
Oh God, I'm not sure I actually want to see that again. Poor Bobby, you know, he just got bad, you know. But the thing is, when you step up on short notice to fights, I don't want to talk about it, actually. I'll start thinking about Volk and I'll tear up and get upset. Let's forget about fighting Islam on short notice. So in the main event, let's move quickly on. We have Dariush versus Arman. It feels strange though with Dariush because it kind of feels like he was on sort of steps to being this big lightweight fighter all of a sudden. You know, we all picked him to beat Oliveira. It felt like, yeah, he's got fairly decent striking. He's a good, strong grappler, but he's just too slow, isn't he? You know, and he got caught, got battered. Do you think we'll ever see Dariush up as a top contender again?
I think he's got a lot of work to do if it was to get back to that stage, because Dariush is one of those that people have been calling for him to get a title shot or at least a number one contender spot for a long time now. And as soon as Charles knocked him out in that first round, I've never seen a hype train crash quicker than that. It's literally the second Dariush was still seeing stars, and fans were saying, "Oh well, he's washed. He just doesn't have it anymore, does he? Charles is the king. Charles versus Islam 2. Let's erect a statue in a dog park for Charles Oliveira." Well, poor Dariush is getting stretched out and asking how many fingers he can see. It sucked for Dariush, but at the same time, that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? You know, like as soon as he steps up in competition, Charles Oliveira, you know, them head kicks were dangerous, and then eventually TKO'd him in the first round. I think he's got a lot of work to do.
100%. He's really, really got to take some big steps because beating Arman's not enough to be looking at contender. You know, then he needs to fight someone like Dustin or Justin and really, really move up. And that's the thing with the lightweight division, isn't it? It feels there's all these great names coming up like Gamrot, Faziev, Arman, Dariush, Bobby Green, for example, even Dan Hooker. And then they step up and then people remember how good Justin Gage is, how good Dustin Poirier is, how good Charles Oliveira is, and how good Islam Makhachev is. These guys are the cream of the crop in one of the best divisions in the world. So to step up, you've got to be amazing. So it's really, really tricky for people like Dariush, and I just don't think we'll sort of ever see him in that picture again. But you know, wilder things have happened. And what I really like about this fight night is everything kind of means something. It's all got stakes, you know, like the winner of the co-main and the main event. We can see them moving up to fight top contenders in this big, heavy lightweight division. And, you know, we could even see them snapping at the heels of someone like Islam. But the problem is with them sort of moving up in this division, it's strange. We've got an active champion, but it kind of feels like the division's on hold because Dustin Poirier doesn't seem interested in fighting anyone lower than him. Justin Gage is happy to wait around. Charles Oliveira ain't fighting anyone but Islam, and Islam is only going to fight the top guys. Michael Chandler seems to be waiting for Conor. So it's like, well, great, yeah, these guys can move up, but where do they go from there, right? There's no one for them to fight.
It's a tough division. It's like a complete stalemate all across the board. Because obviously at this point, all those guys that you just named, I'm not going to go through them again. It really does seem that as soon as one person loses or wins, that it shifts the axis of the division completely.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm just going off hope here, but if Chandler knocks Conor McGregor out in 10 seconds flat, you know, then that's Conor binned. He's nowhere near a title shot, and Chandler will move up. And to knock out a big name will secure him a title shot against Islam. And it's not another rematch. So it'd be favoured. All this other kind of stuff, or, you know, Oliveira versus Conor, something like that. It's a complete stalemate, and we're just waiting for a couple of these fights to be pushed through just to see where everything goes. And it's a hard one to tell, but, you know, with UFC 300 coming up, they're going to need to pull something special out of the bag.
Yeah, something really, really special, because that's the thing is, like, with this division now, we've got to wait when are Islam and Charles fighting. And UFC 300 seems like a good time, but then, you know, you've got Ramadan and stuff, and then Dana White seems to have other fights in mind. So it's really, really tricky. And it's strange. It's one of the most active divisions and now one of the most dead divisions, all in the same sentence. It's really hard to explain with the lightweights, but you kind of get what I'm saying. But let's move on to UFC 300 while we're there. So we've had announcements for UFC 297, 298, and 299, all for next year. But that means all of the male champions will have fought within 4 to 5 months, which is insane to think about. So that leaves a big glaring issue. Who's going to main event UFC 300? And do you think, Mark, it should have a title shot, or do you think it should be more spectacle fights?
There's a couple of routes to go down, isn't there? Because like you say, if those champions have recently fought, then will they be able to make it? But it's a bit like UFC 300 will be a bit like their WrestleMania. Everyone will want the pay-per-view points anyway. You'll want to be part of that spectacle, won't you? And don't forget, Dwayne, Volkanovski is on a couple of months before, so there is actually a good chance that he'll want to be on 300 as well. Our boy coming to get it done again.
Won't surprise me. But yeah, I think, to be honest, yeah, it'd be great to see a title fight. And if we can have Islam versus Oliveira on there, that's great. I'd be really for it. But it just doesn't seem like that fight's on the card. So I'm kind of leaning more to the spectacle side. And for me, Mark, you know what I'm going to say? There's no bigger spectacle than Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. I know it's such a pain because it feels like we've been waiting a whole year for Conor, and even I'm getting a bit fed up of it now. You know, the biggest Conor McGregor stan ever. What's upset me more about this isn't the waiting around for Conor, it's waiting around for Michael Chandler. He came into the UFC and he's been amazing. I've loved every single fight he's been in. And now we've missed out on him for a year. Like, he could have had some cracking fights this year. Do you think it's just a shame that we're missing out on Chandler?
It is. You get why he would hang around, but again, I'm just at the stage of, as a fan, I've said before, I think the UFC's moved on from Conor. He's not been consistent enough, and you know, like there's other champions where you're like, oh, actually, no, I do quite like this over here, and there's other stars have been building. It's not like the UFC was on hold whilst Conor was on hold or on a yacht, putting certain substances in his body, you know. But
proper 12, Mark, proper 12. That's all he's been having.
Yeah, and creatine, lots of it. Yeah, I'm with you though with that. With Michael Chandler, he gets a lot of hate, but every single one of his fights have been amazing. Yeah, win or lose, you know, it's been fantastic, and it is a shame because he even said on his debut he's no spring chicken, and the amount of fights that we could have got. We've already had fantastic fights with Michael Chandler. He's fought the top of that division, win or lose. But it just seems like this is such a shame. And it does annoy me that it seems like one person can really pull the brakes and call the shots, because that's the way it seems.
And it is the way it seems because that's the way it is, unfortunately. Conor is just that big star, whether we like it or not. You know, yeah, fine, the UFC's not being on hold, but they'll put it on hold for him. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. And it is a shame. And I just hope to God we see him return, because otherwise we're just going to be waiting around even longer. And Chandler's not got long left. He's got maybe 1-2 fights left in him before he retires. So I want to see him fight. So hopefully we get to see that fight soon and then see Chandler go off onto something different. So, Mark, obviously, you know, my fantasy is to see Conor versus Chandler main event UFC 300, or I'd gladly have Islam versus Oliveira, but it seems like neither of those fights are going to happen. So for you, Mark, who would your sort of fantasy fight be at UFC 300?
It's funny you said spectacle earlier, because I have one that I thought might be quite fun. Now, let me explain. Let's hear me out here. Brock Lesnar versus Fedor, right? Or Brock Lesnar versus someone that's coming back, you know, like Fabricio Verdum, someone like that, like a big heavyweight name. Brock Lesnar fought at UFC 100, 200, and there's a chance of 300. He's 46, 47, something like that, but it's Brock Lesnar. He ain't going to get a title shot. It's a one-off, like he did with Mark Hunt. I mean, the cup that he will, you know, piss into will burn, but, you know, at the same time, it's a spectacle fight. Just let me live this fantasy in my head. Maybe not Fedor, that was a bit too far, but someone like Fabricio Verdum or something, you know, just a one-off appearance. I think that'd be quite cool. Not the main event, but somewhere on the main card.
Yeah. Opening up the prelims, I reckon, yeah. But that's what Brock likes to do now. You know, we don't want to make it about wrestling, but mainly he comes in, does the first fight, and then pisses off home. He's not bothered. I'm gone. I'm done. I'll see you all later. It sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous. but I love it. I'd actually love to see Brock come back, especially now they've done the big TKO merger. And now that CM Punk returned to WWE, do CM Punk versus Brock in the UFC. CM Punk would get mauled.
Let's throw the weight classes out of the window just to see this. I'm pretty sure every fan will tune in for that, though, as well.
100%. Oh god, I don't think anyone would let it happen. I cannot see a commission allowing a live murder to happen on TV. I just don't think
I don't know. We had Piotr Jan versus Jose Aldo. The referee wanted to see a murder in that fight, didn't he?
Oh my god.
So
terrible.
we've had your main event, then Dwayne, your fantasy main event. What is your co-main event for UFC 300?
So, yes, Dustin Poirier seems very, very keen at returning to UFC 300. And it seems there's a lot of people knocking around for Dustin. But I feel like he needs to fight legends of the sport now and sort of do entertaining fights, because I don't think we're going to see him go for a title shot anytime soon now, you know. I mean, if there's an interim title going, yeah, sure, put him in for it, he'll win it. But, you know, for the main gold, he can't. So for me, I want Dustin Poirier versus Rafael dos Anjos. Dos Anjos is a big name in the sport. He's a former champion. He's kind of near the end of his career, and a big name like Dustin, it could just be a big fun fight. When I was sort of doing a bit of research for this video, and I thought, right, let's have a look. I'll do Dustin versus Rafael dos Anjos, and I thought, have they fought before? I thought surely they must have. And I had to double check, triple check, and they've never fought. And I find that so strange. You know, two big names of the 155 division have never met, and you think, wow, that's insane. So I'd love to see those two fight.
I think it could be a good one, but I think with the way that they've never met, I forget Dustin was a featherweight for a while. Then, you know, RDA was champion, and I think as he lost his belt or whatever had happened there, he kind of became a little bit inconsistent, and then Dustin just seemed to rise, and it would make less and less sense for them to fight as they were like this. So I think it'd just be name value alone. Don't get me wrong, I'd like to tune in for it, but RDA is quite seasoned now, and I don't even know if that'd interest Dustin to fight, but I'd still tune in for it. You know, always tune in for a Dustin Poirier fight. He's got one of the most impressive resumes in UFC.
It's
insane.
all
Completely. But it's funny you say Dustin Poirier, because I've gone for something a little bit outside the box. I've gone Dustin Poirier versus Kamaru Usman. Now,
okay.
Because do you remember the rumors? I think it was after the Michael Chandler fight with Dustin, where he was talking about moving up to welterweight. And I thought, well, you've got to be realistic about this, you know, like he ain't going to get a title shot, all that, because of the times. But I thought the times would make up for it with Kamaru. He'd be ready to face Dustin, to welcome him to the welterweight division. And you need a big name like Kamaru. Imagine how that'd go down. No predictions or anything like that, Dwayne, but a nice little 3-rounder of Dustin Poirier versus Kamaru Usman.
It'd be a lot of fun, actually, thinking about it. And we've kind of gone down similar pathways, you know, former champions, legends of the sports, very similar sort of fights. But I think Usman versus Dustin's a lot more interested than mine. But I saw Dustin talk about it on Ariel the other day, and he was saying, oh, I'm not going to move up to 170. So he bagged on about it for ages. And he's like, nah, I'm not going to do it. Because he was saying, look
at me. Hook, line, and sinker.
Dustin's
fell for it.
What a loser. So Dustin was saying, you know, he said, look, he said, I walk around 180. I cut that 155. These guys, they're weighing way more than that. But I think Usman versus Dustin would be a really, really fun fight. I'd love to see it happen. And maybe it could. You know, with UFC 300, I feel it's one of those cards where almost anything can happen and we can get some fun, big spectacle fights, right? That's the whole point of this card, isn't it? And sort of talking about sort of Usman, he just came up against Khamzat Chimaev, and that was a really, really fun fight. But another fight I'd like to see in that division, and I want to see him fight a real middleweight. I want to see Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker, and I think 300's a perfect card for that. I think it'd be really, really good.
I'm terrified for Robert Whittaker in that fight. I've already had my heart broken by watching him versus DDP. I don't think my heart could take Whittaker being finished again. I cried live when Izzy finished him. I nearly cried when DDP did it, and I think this would just break my heart in two.
Yeah.
It's an interesting fight as well because Rob's style, if Hamzat wanted to keep it standing, Rob's style could really, cause him some problems because he loves the oblique kicks, doesn't
Yeah.
he? And stomps, that kind of thing. It could really cause Hamzat some problems. But on the other hand, if Hamzat wanted that to go to the floor, Rob's no joke as a wrestler, but it just seems to be that Hamzat can throw anyone around.
Yeah, he does. But I don't know. I don't want to sort of like discredit Hamzat because he is fantastic and we saw what he did to Usman. But, I don't think Whitaker's, a wrestler that you should underestimate. I think, I think he was like on the national team for Australia. He's a big guy, physically strong, very, very experienced. And I think that's where Hamzat might falter. He's fighting a really highly experienced guy who paces himself well, because we've seen how quickly Hamzat tires himself out. He injures himself, he throws himself around, and he gets a lot of success doing that. But I'm not sure if he can get Whitaker out of there. I think Whitaker might do him in. But, this is all sort of fantasy booking. It's hard to really know what happens. These aren't real predictions. They're just sort of daft picks out there. So, Mark, who else would you have on this card then?
Right, third, I think you'll like this one, Dwayne. I went for this. I've heard a few rumors, seen a few rumors online, and it really did make a hell of a lot of sense. Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway for the BMF belt. How good does that sound, right?
Yeah,
Seen that
I'd love
online
it.
quite a bit. And Max, to move up to lightweight, it's a fight that he hasn't had before. It's violence ensured, to be quite honest with you. And it gives Max that credit back. I mean, I know that we've said that he's been doing side quests since he lost to Volk 3 times in the featherweight division. But this gives him, it gives it a bit more prestige to go for the BMF belt, because Max Holloway and the BMF belt, they kind of go together, don't they? So does Justin Gaethje, which is why I think this fantasy booking would be insane.
It would be insane. It'd be wild, and I'd love to see it happen, because I think Max is in a very similar position to where Dustin is, in the sense of, yeah, you're not getting a title shot, unfortunately. It's just not going to happen. So what else are you going to do? Because you can't keep fighting these lower ranked guys and just blasting them all out of there, because it ruins the division, doesn't it? So a fight like this seems perfect. But the only caveat I see with it is it's just Justin seems to think the BMF belt is an interim title. He's like, yeah, I'm moving up. I'm going to fight Islam next. It's like, mate, you've got the silver belt yet. It's not the interim gold. It's not it's not a number one contender spot. So, like, he seemed going, I'm going to wait out. I'm going to wait for Islam. And it's such a shame. You think, no, get back in there. Defend the BMF belt. That's what I want to see with this belt. If we want to make it seem legitimate, we have to defend it. We have to see fights. We've got to see something being done with it, right?
To actually legitimize this belt, that's for worse word. I think it does need to be defended. But I think Gaethje's in a fortunate position for himself, where he could just sit out and do nothing for 18 months and he's still get given a title shot, because of the names that he's fought, and going up against Islam, they've never fought before. That would sell like hotcakes.
Oh yeah.
So he's in a very fortunate position. So he doesn't need to fight anyone else. It depends if he wants it. Again, it's one of those that I'm sure they've got plenty of money, but it depends. Do you want the legacy fights now, or are you just waiting for that bag? It depends. You can get both, but it's tricky. Here's me speaking like I've never fought before. Like I've never fought ever.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Really, really difficult, because I get both points, isn't it? With Justin, he could go out, have these big fights, but you get why. You think, nah, if I just wait around, I'll get a shot at the golds. You can't blame him, can you? Because he's got money, he's got name. The only thing he hasn't got is the gold. So, yeah, I understand why he wants to do it. But sort of my next fight, I've been thinking about this for a while, is Henry Cejudo versus Piotr Jan. I think that'd be a really, really fun fight. It'd be like two Oompa Loompas going at it, really just swinging at each other. I think it could be really, really fun, because, Jan's a really good striker, got some decent wrestling, whereas Cejudo's a really, really strong wrestler and got some okay striking. So they almost sort of contradict each other in styles, but I think they're both good enough at their polarizing style that it'd make it a really fun fight,
I love that, and Henry Cejudo has got some okay striking.
Well, he's got great striking, but I mean in comparison to Jan.
I know what you mean, yeah. And to be honest, I'm always tuning in for a Henry Cejudo fight. I'm always tuning into a Piotr Jan fight as well. Piotr's in an unfortunate position where he could really do with the win. So that, I think if that fight was made, Piotr Jan versus Cejudo, it'd be a kind of lose-lose, no matter who wins, for the UFC, because one star is going to get thrown out.
That's the problem, isn't it?
To make sense of it, I suppose if you were gonna throw anyone out, it'd be Cejudo, because he's already been a double champ. He's already had his day. And Piotr Jan, he wants to get back on the rise, doesn't he? Because he had an unfortunate last few fights. But it would be entertaining as hell to see. And I'm looking forward to seeing Cejudo back in there. I'm glad he didn't just one and done the division after coming back.
Yeah.
I'm glad he's actually making a go of it. I think that's the right thing to do. And Piotr Jan, like I've said, he could do with getting back in the win column. And a name like Henry Cejudo would do him the world of good.
Yeah, it really, really would. And it could. But the issue is, if Piotr Jan does beat Cejudo, I don't think that gets him back into the title picture just yet. And he seems keen on that, doesn't he? So he'd have to fight like a big contender or something, right?
I do believe so. It's just with the UFC, because it changes that quickly. We kind of can't go past whatever fights in front of us. It just seems to be get that out of the way, and things might have changed altogether by then. So once this is done, perhaps then things will be more clearly, or there'll be a clearer path to the title or something like that. Someone might get injured. It just changes that quick that you've kind of just got to be, onto it and just take it by fight. But we were speaking earlier about the featherweight division, and that brings me to my next fight on my fantasy UFC 300 fight card is Arnold Allen versus Brian Ortega. I think that they're both big enough names. I think this is one of those like, oh, actually, this could really do well. Obviously, we're behind our boy Arnold Allen, and I want him to batter Brian Ortega. I don't know why he's still on the UFC roster. Never fights.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it?
Get him out of there. I don't see what it is. I'd hope that Arnold Allen would batter him more than Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski did. But I think it could be a fun fight anyway. And it's another great name for Arnold Allen. Obviously, he stepped up against Max Holloway. It didn't go his way, but a very close competitive fight. Brian Ortega is another name to solidify. Yep, I am here at the top of this division, not just a contender. I am one of the very, very top, and I'm almost there for a title shot.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I think Arnold Allen needs to be fighting these big names, these high-level fighters, and get himself back towards that title shot. Because if you beat someone like Ortega, that's it. He's fighting the winner of Volk versus Topuria. But the only problem is, I think Arnold Allen's fighting at UFC 297, and he's again is it against Esolov or whatever his name is, which is a silly fight for him to take. I think this guy's like ranked 10th or something. It's like, why are you fighting so low down, Arnold? You're a big name yourself now. You're a high contender. Get yourself in there. But it's weird, isn't it? I'm such a, I'm so picky. I'm like, oh, these guys should be fighting all the time, blah, 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 blah. Oh, why is he fighting this? That's stupid, go wait around. Like, you just can't win, can you? It's just silly. But yeah, it's a fight I'd love to see. I always want to see Arnold Allen fight. I think it'd be great. So then for me, Mark, a fight I really, really want to see at UFC 300. And it's a fight I've been wanting to see for a long time, especially with sort of the light heavyweight division and how interesting that is. And it felt like we were close to getting it, is Yuri Prohaska versus Jan Blachowicz. I think these two are two top contenders. We need to see these two fight, and then they can have a rematch with Alex Pereira. I think it'll be great. Two European fighters going at it on a massive card.
Yeah, Polish Power versus the terrifying Samurai. I think that could be absolute explosions everywhere. And that fight makes sense as well. You've always said, so going off your logic, is that losers fight losers, winners fight winners. Jan's coming back after a loss, so is Yuri. Get them two in there together, fighting there. And a number one contender spot there, no one would have a problem with that. Because I think Jamal's going to be out for a good while yet, isn't he? And I think they've done enough to solidify themselves as top contenders, 100%. I mean, I can't deny that Yuri still terrifies the life out of me. And I think he'd beat Jan, but we're not really into predictions yet. I just like the idea of that. I like the idea of getting some more momentum behind this light heavyweight division and shove it out there. Let's get it lively again.
100%. It's one of these divisions that's got some fantastic talent on it, but it's a cursed division, isn't it? We're always waiting, right? Okay, who's getting a crack at the title now, right? Who's fighting for the vacant belt now? It's getting a joke. So I want to see a really, really big contenders fight. And Yuri versus Jan would be incredibly exciting. But if not, hopefully we'll get to see that on like a European card next year. That'd be really good. Maybe in Czech or Poland. You know, you've got some big stars from over there, and you've got all these English and French fighters who can go over as well. Make this big European card. I'd love to see that happen.
I think how closely those two are ranked, I doubt that we will never ever see that fight. One day we will see Yuri Prohaska versus Jan Blachowicz. But my last fantasy pick for UFC 300, Dwayne, I would love to see Jim Miller go out on a win at UFC 300 against anyone. I don't care who it is. He fought at UFC 100, 200, and potentially going to fight at 300. Get that Robbie Lawler spectacular under a minute finish and ride off into the sunset. I would love to see that happen. I think it just makes sense. It's the fairy tale ending, isn't it?
Yeah, it'd be perfect. You know, especially as you were saying, Jim Miller's been at UFC 100, 200, and don't forget, Mark, so's Brock. He was at 100, 200. Let's put Jim Miller versus Brock at UFC 300, and then they've both done it.
F5 through the cage.
But yeah, you're right. Seeing Jim Miller fight there, I think it would just be a lovely moment, wouldn't it? You know, that's a great final fight. He's been on all these big cards. It's the perfect way to go out, isn't it?
It's perfect. And let's not forget that Jim Miller hasn't exactly flustered. Yeah, he's got wins and losses, but who hasn't? But, you know, like the last few years of his career, wasn't it only a few months ago he got like a 33-second knockout against a young up-and-comer? Jim Miller's late 30s, like, come on, like, if he can still crack, he can still crack. Exactly like we were speaking about Robbie Lawler earlier. But as soon as he beat Nico Price in about, 30 seconds, you think, oh, maybe he shouldn't retire. But that's just us as greedy fans, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the big problem, isn't it? But either way, UFC 300 is going to be an incredibly exciting card, or at least it bloody better be. Otherwise, I'm coming for you, Dana. Brother, like I'm Hulk Hogan.
I'm sure he's terrified. I'm sure Dana White is absolutely terrified there.
He should be. But I do think that's all we've got time for. Thank him for watching. If you can like, comment, and subscribe, it really does help us out.